Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with the Attorney book tag. This tag was created by Katie from A Sea of Tomes, and she was also the one who tagged me. I will of course link her original video in the description below. Number 1. Opening statement. What is one of your favorite opening lines of a book? And I have to go with one that I loved so much I memorized it without even trying to, and that is the first line of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. There once was a boy named Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. Just right off the bat, you get the sense of humor, you get introduced to Eustace, and it's funny and it's important, and I love it. Number 2, incompetence. Discuss a book that had poor representation. I'm gonna go with Shut Out by Cody Keplinger. I read that book last year, and honestly, I think I've blocked a lot of it out from my mind because it's a Lysistrata retelling, which sounds great, but it was actually a terrible book. One of the things about it that was so frustrating was the representation. The main character, Lissa, I think her name is, she's supposed to have OCD, like they actually use that phrase, but the way it's written is not very, I don't think it's very consistent with the way a lot of people experience it, and of course representation is different for everyone, but it kind of sounded like the author was doing that thing where like, oh, she's really neat and she cleans a lot. OCD, and it's like, that's not the same thing. Yeah, really didn't like that book, and I don't recommend it. Number 3, confidentiality. What's a book you secretly love or hate? So I'm pretty vocal about my opinions on this channel, so I'm gonna go with one that I read a really long time ago that I don't think I've ever talked about on this channel, and that is Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein. I hated this book. It's still one of my least favorite books I've ever read. This was actually the book that single-handedly convinced me that I hated science fiction and I was never ever going to like science fiction. I feel really bad because one of my dad's favorite books, he really likes the author, but I just hate it. The characters are awful. The plot is stupid. The writing wasn't that good. The premise is just kind of like, it irritates me, and the characterization of the female characters, even though I was young enough that I didn't really have the knowledge or experience to articulate what was wrong with it, it was bad. It was just really bad. It's a science fiction classic that I don't understand why it is one. And in case you're wondering, this is one of the books that I never even added to my Goodreads because I hated it and I kind of want to forget it happened. If you want more of an explanation on that, you can go to my 10 Strange Bookish Facts video, which I will link, but yeah, not a fan. Number 4, conflict of interest. Discuss a book that made you question something you previously felt strongly about. So this one actually took me a while because I think most times when I read a book with strong themes or messages, I seek it out because it's something I already believe in, I already feel strongly about. So I'm going to go with something a little bit different. And the topic I chose specifically is censorship, which I think is something where a lot of us, we hear censorship and it's like, that's always bad. Like, you shouldn't tell people what to read, which I think is true. But I think where it gets into a gray area is content warnings and people being prepared for what they're going to experience if it's something that could be very upsetting for them, like triggering or just something they don't feel like reading at the moment because of their mental health space or whatever. There's a question in a really popular tag going around. I can't remember which tag it is, but I remember answering it. I will put the information if I remember what tag it was and who created it. But I think it brought up a lot of great discussion about how censorship is bad, but content warnings are not. And I'm gonna pick a book where I don't know if this was the first time I really read something where it's like, I wish I would have had a content warning for this, but I distinctly remember having that feeling about this book. And that was The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton. And I didn't like that book overall. Speaking of like books that put me off whole genres, this was one of the ones that made me think I hated magical realism. Because I don't think this was very good magical realism. I know a lot of people love it. It's, in some circles, it's like a booktube darling at this point, but I didn't like it. I thought it was basically just tragedy porn. Specifically, the scene I'm talking about is, there's this horrifyingly graphic rape scene that kind of comes out of nowhere, and I had already been like watching booktube for a while at this point, so I remember when I read that being just really shocked that not once in all of the reviews and raves I had seen about this book had anyone ever mentioned like, oh, by the way, be prepared for this. And I know that at the time, that was a few years ago, I don't think we were quite as conscientious about that, so I don't think people were like outright keeping that information from people. But I just think there wasn't as much awareness about that, and reading that book is a really good representative of how I feel about content now, where it's like, yes, you don't want to like tell people what to read, but there's some things that people should be prepared for before they go into a book, and they shouldn't feel bad for asking for that. It's kind of why I feel like we should move away from an age range categorization and move into more of a content style like they do kind of for movies. I just think that would be a lot more helpful, because it's like, maybe you are an adult but you just don't feel like reading a fantasy book where all the women are raped, Number 5, what's a book you're on the fence about? So you're either on the fence about reading it or you have mixed feelings on. And I'm going to go for one that I have read that I had extremely mixed feelings about, and that was Kiss of the Royal by Lindsay Duga. I'll link the wrap-up where I talked about it. I think it was last year that I read it. And I still don't know exactly how I feel about this book. It's a fantasy world where the magic is transmitted through the power of kisses. And I remember when I like knew about the premise and like I had heard about the book, I was like, this could go very badly or it could be a really interesting commentary. And I think it ended up somewhere in the middle. There were some really good points brought up, but I don't think all of it was completely explored. And the story itself, some of it was just like, just weird. I don't know. I think I ended up giving that book 3 or 3.5 stars, and I am glad I read it. Like, there was some good storytelling there. And I'm not saying I don't recommend it to people, but I just have a lot of mixed feelings about that book. Number 6, objection. Talk about a book genre that has elements or tropes you strongly oppose. And I'm gonna go with horror, and not to say that like it's a bad genre, but for me personally, it's not something I'm ever going to enjoy or want to pick up. There are some like fantasy books I've read that kind of veer into like atmospheric type horror, which I can enjoy. I really can like that. But I mean like the horror that is supposed to scare you. Like and I'm the same with movies. I've just like never understood wanting to experience something that makes you uncomfortable and afraid and sick. Like, it's like, those are things you normally want to avoid. And I think part of the reason I feel so strongly about this is because, especially when I was little, I would get a lot of nightmares, to the point where it was like affecting my quality of sleep. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why I have such strong feelings about the genre and why I like have such a hard and fast, like, nope, not for me, kind of opinion on it. So obviously I'm not saying other people shouldn't read it or watch it or whatever, but I don't want to experience that. Like, those are all feelings that I try to avoid. So yeah, don't really want to give my overactive imagination more fuel to terrify me. Number 7, verdict. Talk about a book that made up your mind about something or solidified your feelings or position on something. So I'm going to go for one that kind of solidified my feelings, or more accurately, it gave me a concrete like facts or analytics about an opinion I have. And that's a book I just read recently at the time of filming this, and that is Moonrise by Sarah Crossan. So this is a novel in verse about a boy who goes to visit his brother on death row. His execution date is set and it's coming up really quick, and so he goes to visit him and try and work through a lot of this family history they have and to figure out like what happened. And it's a really heartbreaking book. And reading this book, I think the way it incorporated some real statistics about the death penalty system in America, I think that was one of the strongest things about this book. It was just done so well. And it gave me some concrete details to give to people, because I think the problem is that some of the statistics sound so unbelievable that I think people assume you're making them up. Like the fact in Moonrise they mention that like it costs almost $4 million to execute somebody, and that is 8 times as much as it does to keep them in prison for life. And people don't believe that, because you'd think that it would cost more money to keep someone around, you know, to like feed them and house them and everything, but it doesn't. So that's one of the things I think that book did really well. And another thing is like the way that so many of these cases are, like the way they were convicted was not according to regulations, or like the confessions were coerced. I don't remember if the book went into this, but the fact that disproportionately inmates who receive the death penalty are people of color, and poor people too. And I think that book is a really good encapsulation of a lot of the reasons why the system is not working. Also, I don't think the book talked about this one, but it doesn't even work as a deterrent. In states where the death penalty is in practice, violent crime rates are actually higher. Number 8, disbarment. Pick a book that should have its ISBN number taken away and not be sold anymore. Okay, so I love that question, but I feel a little bad about revoking an ISBN number for a book. I was gonna try and think of one that is just really, that I think is like really unhealthy and problematic, but I think I've talked about a lot of those ones really recently, so I'm just gonna go with like one of my least favorite books, and I know a lot of people love it, so I'm not saying you shouldn't read it, but Night Film by Marisha Pessl. I hated this book so much. I felt very betrayed after reading it because I was told I would love it, that it's like one of the best books in the world. Like, even if you don't like mystery thrillers, like even if you don't read this kind of genre, like this is gonna change your life and it's gonna be incredible. Like, the mystery itself was stupid. The writing was really irritating, and I don't think, just like as a craft perspective, it was done very well. The characters were ridiculous, and also I distinctly remember this one scene where this like teenage girl comes on to the middle-aged man investigator, and it made me gag. It was so awful. It was so bad that I actually like thought maybe the author is a man using a pen name, which I know it's like men shouldn't write that stuff either, but like when women do it, I feel like a very personal sense of betrayal. I was a woman, and I didn't like that book at all. And finally, number 9 is defense. What's a book or character you'll defend to the ends of the earth against haters? And I have 2 answers for this. I have a writer and a character. The writer I'm gonna go with is Shakespeare. So you're probably thinking like, Shakespeare doesn't need anyone to defend him. He's like considered one of the most important writers in the English language. Like people study him in schools, like he's doing fine. Like his works are doing okay. But I think with Shakespeare, it's almost gotten to the point where like the counterculture is so strong that it's like, now it's cool to rebel against it and act like Shakespeare didn't even matter. He's a writer like anybody else. You can like or not like the things he writes and the way he writes, and that's totally fine. Like that is your prerogative. I don't really like when people act like he didn't matter, or when people say like he's overrated, or like we shouldn't have to read him anymore. Like I think for one thing, I think there should be a revolution in schools in the way that he is taught, because I think the way that he is taught is the reason a lot of kids don't like his work. But Shakespeare does matter. Like even the stories that he retold or adapted from other stories, the things he did with them were unusual. Like he invented so many words in the English language. He changed the way we view certain genres in plays, and like I do love his works, but I understand he's not for everybody. I totally get that. But what I don't really get is acting like he didn't even matter. Like I personally hate the works of Chaucer that I have read. I don't like his stuff at all, but I acknowledge that he's really, really important. So that's kind of what I'm defending here, is like him or dislike him, but Shakespeare, he was a talented storyteller, and he did change the way we use the English language. And the character that I'm going to defend is Alice from Let's Talk About Love by Claire Can. So I didn't like fall in love with this book. There are actually a lot of things about it that I think could have been done better. But we follow our main character Alice, and she is asexual, and when she comes out as asexual, her girlfriend breaks up with her. And that's not a spoiler, it happens in like the first few pages. So the rest of the book is Alice getting another crush and trying to decide if she's going to come out to him because it went so badly last time. And like I said, there were some things I think this book didn't do very well, but I do need to defend Alice here, because I wasn't even aware this was a thing until like recently. I came across some reviews on Goodreads, and like this book came out a year or two ago, so I don't know if this happened at the time it came out and I just didn't hear about it or what. But yeah, so a couple months ago I came across some really angry reviews about this book that were upset at the way that Alice's girlfriend was vilified by the book and by readers of the book. They were saying that she was portrayed as the villain for wanting something more sexual, something different from their relationship, that she shouldn't have felt bad about like breaking up with Alice, and that everybody was being unfair to her. And I kind of get where they're coming from. Like, I think you are supposed to think badly of her girlfriend, but I think it was more because the way the book is written, you're seeing why Alice is afraid to come out to people. It's not necessarily saying like her girlfriend was wrong to do this. It's saying like this is what it did to Alice's kind of like perspective on herself and her self-confidence and her comfort with her sexuality. So I don't think it was necessarily like trying to do that, but I can kind of see that complaint a little bit. The thing I don't understand is all of the people who were saying that Alice should have compromised, that she should have stayed in this relationship and had sex more when she didn't want to. What the fuck? That is not okay. Compromise is for deciding like who's going to do the dishes tonight. Compromise is not about having sex when you don't want to. Like, you do not owe anybody complete and perpetual access to your body. So if Alice decides that she doesn't want to have sex anymore, in fact it's kind of implied that she's been uncomfortable with it for a while, but she didn't feel okay saying that, and her girlfriend wants to leave because she wants something different from the relationship, that is totally fine. She is also entitled to feeling like fulfilled in their relationship. So if that's something she's no longer getting, yes, break up and go find somebody else. But the way that these people were acting, like Alice was the villain for not compromising, for not going through with something she was uncomfortable or unhappy with, that she should have been having sex when she didn't want to for the sake of their relationship. That is bullshit. And I can hardly believe that that was even a discussion we were having. But yeah, so I guess what I'm defending is Alice's right to not have sex if she doesn't want to. I needed to get that out there because that's been bothering me for a really long time. On a brighter note, I had a ton of fun doing this tag. I'm going to tag a few people in the description. Thank you again, Katie, for tagging me. I will see you guys soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye.